The year was 2287, and Marcus Hayes stood before the largest viewing window he had ever seen. From this vantage point, Jupiter hung in the dark void like a giant marble, swirling with storms and colors that had fascinated humanity for centuries. But Marcus was not thinking about Jupiter. His mind was focused on the station that orbited the planet, a structure so massive that entire cities could fit inside it. This was the seat of the Galactic Council, and today Marcus would represent all of Earth. Marcus was a man of medium height with dark hair touched by silver at the temples. He had been chosen as Earth's ambassador because he possessed a rare combination of qualities. He was intelligent enough to understand complex negotiations, but humble enough to admit when he did not know something. He was confident without being arrogant and compassionate without being weak. These traits had served him well throughout his career, and now they would be tested in ways he could not yet imagine. The diplomatic vessel Endeavour had arrived at the station 3 days ago. The journey from Earth had taken weeks, and Marcus had used that time to prepare himself mentally for what was to come. He had studied the histories of the various species that made up the Galactic Council. He had learned about their customs, their values, and their ways of communicating. He had read everything available about their technology, their military capabilities, and their economic systems. He felt ready, though a small part of him wondered if anyone could truly be ready for the first real contact between humanity and an alien civilization. The conference chamber was unlike anything Marcus had expected. The walls seemed to be made of a material that reflected light in ways that hurt the eyes if you stared too long. The seats around the large oval table were adjustable, designed to accommodate the different body types of various alien species. There were beings here who stood on 4 legs, others who floated in special chambers filled with liquid, and still others whose forms seemed to shift slightly in ways that made Marcus deeply uncomfortable. The head of the council was a tall, graceful being named Auron, whose species came from a world orbiting a binary star system. Auron had skin that shimmered with patterns of blue and silver, and eyes that seemed to contain entire galaxies within them. When Auron spoke, even through the translation devices, his voice carried a weight of authority that made every being in the room listen carefully. Auron began the meeting by welcoming Earth to the broader galactic community. He explained that humanity had proven itself worthy of joining the Galactic Council's federation by avoiding nuclear self-destruction, developing peaceful governments, and reaching a state of relative harmony among themselves. These accomplishments, Auron said, were rare among emerging species. The benefits of joining the Council were outlined in detail. Earth would receive access to medical technology that could cure diseases that had plagued humanity for millennia. Educational systems would be shared, allowing human children to learn about the vast universe and the countless civilizations within it. Trade agreements would open vast markets to human goods and services. Security would be guaranteed by the combined military might of the Council, protecting Earth from any hostile species. Marcus listened carefully to every word, his mind cataloging the information and analyzing it for hidden meanings. Everything sounded wonderful, almost too wonderful. He had learned long ago that when something seemed too good to be true, it usually was, but he kept his doubts hidden behind a mask of genuine interest and appreciation. Then another figure spoke. This was Vexthar, a representative of the Krell species. Vexthar was smaller than Auron, with a body covered in dark scales and eyes that seemed to glow with an inner light. When Vexthar spoke, Marcus detected something in his tone that made him uncomfortable. It was not overtly hostile, but there was something calculating about it. Vexthar suggested that while humanity was welcome to join the Council, certain precautions should be taken. He noted that humans had a remarkable capacity for innovation and change. Throughout their history, they had overcome obstacles through sheer determination and creativity. This was an admirable quality, Vexthar said, but it also meant that humans could potentially become too powerful if given access to certain technologies too quickly. Vexthar proposed that humanity receive access to most technologies available within the Council, but that certain areas be restricted for now. These restrictions would only be temporary, he assured everyone, just until humanity had integrated more fully into galactic society. Advanced weapon systems, faster-than-light drives beyond a certain capability, and genetic modification technologies would be kept from humanity for now. Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. This was the moment that most bothered him about the proposal. He wanted to object immediately, but something told him to wait. He wanted to understand why these specific technologies were being restricted. When he asked this question, Vexthar smiled a smile that did not reach his eyes. Vexthar explained that these technologies were restricted for many species, not just humanity. It was a matter of galactic security. If every species had access to unlimited weapons and genetic modification, there would be chaos. The restrictions protected everyone, including Earth. Marcus nodded and accepted the explanation, though doubt continued to gnaw at him. The rest of the council seemed satisfied with this arrangement. One by one, each representative agreed that Earth should be welcomed into their federation, with the proposed restrictions in place. The agreement was formalized through a complex series of rituals and documents that took several more days to complete. When it was done, Marcus signed the treaty on behalf of all humanity. He felt pride in the accomplishment, but also an uneasiness that he could not quite shake. As he watched Jupiter slowly grow larger as the Endeavor made its journey back home, Marcus thought about what he had done. He had brought Earth into a galactic community. He had opened the doors to technologies and knowledge that would transform human civilization. And yet something about the restrictions bothered him deeply. When Marcus arrived on Earth and presented the agreement to world leaders, they celebrated. News broadcasts showed people dancing in the streets, hugging strangers, crying tears of joy. Humanity had finally joined the larger galactic community as equals. The restrictions seemed like a small price to pay for everything humanity would gain. Marcus smiled and celebrated along with everyone else, but in his private moments he could not stop wondering about Vexthar's words. Why had the Krell representative seemed so interested in limiting human access to certain technologies? And why did Marcus feel like he had missed something important in that conference chamber orbiting Jupiter? He did not know it yet, but his doubts were justified. The restrictions were not temporary, and they were not meant to protect galactic security. They were meant to contain humanity, to keep the species from becoming too powerful. The Galactic Council had made a calculation, and they had decided that the potential of humanity was too dangerous to be left unchecked. They would welcome Earth into their community, but only as a servant, never as a true equal. Elena Rodriguez stared at her computer screen, her eyes burning from the endless hours of work. The research station orbited Earth at a distance of 5,000 kilometers, far enough away to avoid interference from the planet's atmosphere, but close enough to receive data transmissions constantly. Elena had been the head of the Xenological Research Division for 3 years now, and in that time, she had become the leading expert on Galactic Council technology. 5 years had passed since Marcus Hayes had returned from his historic diplomatic mission. In those 5 years, humanity had changed dramatically. New medicines arrived regularly from the Council, curing cancers and genetic diseases that had plagued people for generations. Universities around the world had begun teaching courses on alien philosophy, culture, and history. Trade had flourished, and the global economy had expanded in ways that economists had previously thought impossible. The future looked bright, and most people on Earth believed that humanity had made the right choice in joining the Galactic Council. But Elena had always been different. She was a woman who questioned everything, who looked beneath the surface of things to find the truth hidden underneath. She was tall and lean, with dark hair that she usually kept in a practical bun, and intelligent eyes that missed nothing. She had devoted her career to understanding the technologies that the Council had shared with humanity. Not just how to use them, but why they worked the way they did. 3 hours ago, Elena had been reviewing data transmissions when something unusual had appeared in the feed. It was a large data packet, poorly encrypted and clearly not intended for her eyes. At first, she had almost deleted it without looking at it. Unauthorized data could be dangerous, and accessing it without permission could get her into serious trouble with the authorities. But Elena's curiosity had gotten the better of her, as it always did. She had opened the packet, and what she found inside had made her blood run cold. The documents were from the Galactic Council itself, classified files that outlined something called the Containment Protocol for Emerging Species. Elena's hands shook as she read through the files, scrolling past page after page of data. There were projections, mathematical models, and strategic assessments. And at the center of it all was humanity. The files revealed that the Galactic Council had been watching humanity for over 100 years. Scientists from various alien species had studied human history, human behavior, and human potential, and they had reached a conclusion that terrified Elena as she read it. If humanity was given unrestricted access to advanced technology, the Council believed that Earth would become the dominant military and economic power in the galaxy within approximately 100 years. This was not a possibility that the Council welcomed. The files went on to describe the strategy that had been chosen. Humanity would be welcomed into the Galactic Council, given access to basic technologies and medicines, and allowed to trade with other species. But certain technologies would be permanently restricted. The faster-than-light drives that the Council possessed could be made 3 times more efficient, but these improved designs would never be shared with humanity. Advanced weapon systems that could destroy planets would be kept secret. Genetic modification technologies that could transform a species into something entirely new would remain forbidden to humans. The restrictions were not meant to be temporary, as Marcus Hayes had been told. They were permanent. They were meant to keep humanity in a state of perpetual dependence on the Council, always grateful for the crumbs of technology they were given, but never powerful enough to challenge Council authority. Elena continued reading, barely breathing. There were more documents, strategic assessments from different Council members. One document was particularly chilling. It was a report from Vexithar himself, the Krell representative who had proposed the restrictions. In his report, Vexithar had written that human creativity and adaptability made them uniquely dangerous. He had observed throughout history that humans did not follow the expected patterns of development that other species did. When humans encountered obstacles, they did not simply accept them. They found new ways around them. They invented solutions that no one had predicted. This unpredictability made humanity a threat. Vexithar had recommended that humanity be monitored carefully. If at any point humans seemed to be developing technologies beyond what the Council had approved, those projects should be sabotaged. False information should be fed to human scientists, causing their research to lead nowhere. Equipment could be mysteriously damaged. Human scientists who got too close to forbidden discoveries should be given false information or redirected towards safer areas of research. Elena felt sick as she finished reading. She now understood why some of humanity's most promising research projects had failed, why the fusion energy project had experienced sudden and inexplicable problems, why the quantum computing initiative had stalled despite theoretical breakthroughs, why several of Earth's best scientists had experienced equipment failures and data corruption that had derailed their work for months. It had not been bad luck or human error. It had been sabotage orchestrated by the Galactic Council itself. She immediately made copies of all the data and stored them in multiple secure locations. Then she encrypted the files with security protocols that she knew the Council would have difficulty breaking into. She sat back in her chair, trying to process what she had learned. She needed to tell someone, but who could she trust? If she went to the authorities, would they believe her? And more importantly, would they do anything about it, or would they try to cover it up? Elena made a decision. She would contact Marcus Hayes directly. He was the one who had negotiated with the Council, and he would be the one most likely to understand the implications of what she had discovered. More than that, he would know what steps needed to be taken next. The next morning, Elena was on a shuttle headed to Earth. She did not go through official channels. She used personal codes and favors owed to her by friends in high places to slip past the normal security checks. When she arrived at Marcus Hayes's private residence in what used to be called Colorado, she knew that everything was about to change. Marcus listened to everything Elena had to say without interrupting her. When she finished presenting the evidence, he sat in silence for a long time. Then he stood up and looked out the window at the mountains in the distance. "I suspected something like this," Marcus said quietly. "I felt it during the negotiations, but I convinced myself that I was being paranoid. I wanted to believe that the Council was genuine." "What do we do?" Elena asked. "We tell the President," Marcus said, "and then we prepare for a confrontation that the Galactic Council never saw coming. Because if there is one thing I have learned about my own species, it is this. We do not accept being contained. We do not accept being slaves to anyone, even if those anyone are more technologically advanced. When we discover we have been betrayed, we act, and we act decisively." Elena nodded, feeling a mixture of fear and determination fill her heart. The truth had been revealed, and humanity's response would reshape the entire galaxy. President David Norton sat in a secure underground bunker beneath the United Nations headquarters. Around him were the most brilliant minds on Earth, brought together in absolute secrecy. Elena Rodriguez stood at the front of the room with a projection display showing the classified council documents. Military commanders, scientists, and government officials listened in stunned silence as the truth was laid bare before them. The room was cold and sterile, designed to be completely isolated from any electronic surveillance. No signals could enter or leave this chamber without passing through multiple layers of encryption and security protocols. The president had ordered this level of secrecy because he understood that if the Galactic Council learned that humanity had discovered their deception, they might take action to ensure humanity never became a threat. When Elena finished her presentation, the room erupted in angry voices. Military commanders wanted immediate confrontation. Some wanted to launch attacks on Council installations in human space. Others urged caution, pointing out that the Council's military capabilities far exceeded anything humanity currently possessed. The debate raged for hours, growing more heated with each passing minute. Finally, President Norton raised his hand for silence. He was an older man with gray hair and a face that had been weathered by years of difficult decisions. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of his office and his conscience. "We need to think strategically," the president said. "We cannot defeat the Galactic Council through military force alone. Our technology is inferior to theirs. Our military forces, while impressive by Earth standards, are nothing compared to the firepower at their disposal. But we have something the Council does not fully understand. We have something that cannot be measured in weapons or technology." "What is that?" asked General Amanda Foster, the commander of Earth's military forces. She was a stern woman with steel in her eyes and decades of combat experience. She had expected the president to order some kind of military response, and she was frustrated by his measured approach. "We have human ingenuity," the president replied. "We have the ability to adapt, to innovate, and to find solutions to problems that seem impossible. Throughout our history, we have always managed to overcome obstacles through creativity and determination. This is our true strength, and it is something that the Galactic Council has consistently underestimated. Over the next 3 years, Earth became a hive of secret activity. Dr. Elena Rodriguez led a team of humanity's greatest scientists in a program that the government called Project Independence. The goal was simple but incredibly ambitious. They would reverse engineer the technology that the Galactic Council had given to humanity, and in doing so, they would unlock the secrets that the Council had tried to keep hidden. Elena worked in a secure facility, hidden in the mountains of what used to be called Switzerland. Her team consisted of physicists, engineers, mathematicians, and computer specialists. They worked around the clock, sleeping in shifts and rarely leaving the facility. They had access to all the Council technology that humanity had received, and they had the stolen documents from Elena's initial discovery that showed them exactly what they were looking for. The breakthrough came 18 months into the project. A young physicist named Kevin Park discovered that the Council's faster-than-light drives operated on principles that were actually simpler than the overcomplicated designs they had been given. The Council had intentionally made the technology more complex than it needed to be, hiding the true elegance of the solution beneath layers of unnecessary steps. Once Kevin understood this, he was able to develop an improved version of the drive that was 3 times more efficient than anything the Council had provided. Elena called a secret meeting with President Norton and General Foster. She presented them with the new technology and explained what it meant. "This drive allows us to travel faster than we could before," Elena explained. "But more importantly, it shows us that the Council's superiority is not insurmountable. They have simply had a head start in technological development. With time and effort, we can catch up. We can exceed them." General Foster began developing military strategies based on Elena's discoveries. She studied the documented capabilities of Council military forces and looked for weaknesses. She realized something that she brought to the president's attention. The Council has assumed that their technology gives them an absolute advantage, General Foster said. They expect their opponents to fight like they do, using brute force and technological superiority. But humans have never fought that way. We use strategy. We use deception. We find the weakness in our opponent's armor and strike there. If we can catch the Council unprepared, if we can coordinate a strike with other species who are also oppressed by their rule, we might be able to do damage before they have time to fully respond. This sparked a new realization. Humanity was not alone in being oppressed by the Galactic Council. Elena's research team had discovered evidence of other species who were also being held back by arbitrary restrictions. There were the Valorian reptilians who had been denied access to advanced computing technology for decades. There were the beings from Sigma Draconis, a crystalline species whose unique properties made them invaluable for certain types of technology, but who were forced to work as servants in council laboratories. Over the next 18 months, secret envoys from Earth began contacting these oppressed species. The messages were carefully coded and sent through channels that the council would not monitor. Slowly, quietly, alliances began to form. Other species began to share their technological discoveries with humanity. The Valorians provided insights into advanced computing systems. The beings from Sigma Draconis shared their understanding of crystalline electronics. Each species contributed what they could. Elena worked with scientists from multiple species, communicating through secure quantum encrypted channels. The collaboration was difficult at first because of language barriers and different ways of thinking about problems. But gradually, a culture of cooperation developed. Scientists from different worlds discovered that they shared a common desire to understand the universe and to push the boundaries of what was possible. General Foster coordinated with military commanders from the allied species. They developed a plan that would allow them to launch a coordinated strike against the Council's central command station. The plan relied on surprise, speed, and perfect coordination between forces spread across light years of space. Elena developed something that would be crucial to the operation's success. It was a digital virus, a carefully designed program that could infiltrate the Council's computer networks and disable their communication systems and weapons controls without destroying the station itself. The virus was designed to exploit specific vulnerabilities in the Council's code that Elena had discovered during her analysis of their systems. The President called a final meeting with all the key people involved in Project Independence. In that secure bunker, surrounded by generals and scientists and intelligence officers, he made the final decision. "We will strike," President Norton said, "not out of revenge or anger, but out of necessity. The Galactic Council has shown us that they do not respect equality or partnership. They have lied to us and sabotaged our progress. We will free ourselves, and in doing so, we will free others. This will be humanity's greatest test. Everything that makes us human, all of our creativity and courage and hope, will be tested in the coming days. But I believe in us. I believe that we can overcome this challenge." The operation was scheduled for spring, a symbolic moment of renewal and rebirth. As the date approached, humanity prepared for war. Though few people on Earth knew that the preparations were happening. The future of the entire galaxy was about to change, and only a handful of people knew it. Commander Nathan Price stood on the bridge of the warship humanity had named Resolve. Around him, screens displayed real-time data from across the operation. It was the spring equinox on Earth, the moment when day and night were perfectly balanced. And it was also the moment when humanity would make its stand against the Galactic Council. Nathan was a tall man with a calm demeanor and sharp tactical thinking that had made him the obvious choice to lead humanity's military forces. He had spent the last 3 years preparing for this moment, studying his opponent's patterns and planning for every possible scenario. The operation was complex, beyond anything humanity had ever attempted. Strike forces from 5 different species were coordinated through secure communication channels that relied on quantum encryption technology. The teams had rehearsed the operation dozens of times in simulation, but nothing could truly prepare them for the reality of combat. Nathan knew that despite all the preparation, there would be chaos. There would be unexpected problems. The only question was whether humanity and its allies could adapt fast enough to overcome those problems. The primary target was the Galactic Council's Central Command Station. It orbited a planet called Centrum Prime, a world located roughly in the geographical center of Council territory. The station was massive, nearly the size of a small moon, and it was believed to be impregnable. The Council had never been seriously challenged militarily, so their defenses had never truly been tested. Nathan intended to test them today. "All strike forces report ready status," a young communications officer named Lisa Chen reported. She had been monitoring communications from the Allied forces for months, and she knew the voice signatures of every commander involved in the operation. Nathan nodded. "Signal the green light. Operation begins now." The warships began their approach to the Centrum Prime system. They had emerged from faster-than-light travel at a distance of 50 million kilometers from the station, far enough away that their sensors would detect them only seconds before they came into weapons range. The speed of light was the fastest anything could travel at, and it took time for information to travel across vast distances. This delay was crucial to the operation's success. The human warships were equipped with weapons that had been developed through reverse engineering Council technology combined with human innovation. They were not as powerful as Council weapons, but they were faster and more accurate. Nathan had realized that in any conflict between forces of unequal strength, the side with superior speed and accuracy often won, despite being outgunned. As the Resolve approached the station, Nathan watched the tactical displays carefully. The station was beginning to respond, activating its defensive systems. Shields were coming online, weapons were being targeted, but this was precisely what Nathan had expected. "Release the digital virus," he commanded. Across space, Elena Rodriguez's carefully designed program was transmitted toward the Council station. It infiltrated the station's computer networks through multiple pathways simultaneously, avoiding detection by spreading itself across thousands of systems at once. Within minutes, the virus had established itself throughout the station's infrastructure. Suddenly, without warning, the station's communication systems went dark. Its weapon systems froze in place, locked by code that the Council's engineers did not understand. The shields flickered and failed. The station, which had never been attacked and had never needed to defend itself, was suddenly blind and helpless. "All forces, attack pattern Delta," Nathan commanded. The human warships opened fire. Weapons systems that had been developed in secret laboratories across Earth unleashed their payload on the station. But Nathan had given orders to avoid destroying it. The goal was not to kill the Council members, but to neutralize their power and force them to negotiate. The weapons targeted specific systems, not the station's main structure. They targeted power generation facilities, weapons emplacements, and communication arrays. They did not target the habitation sections where the Council members were located. The Allied forces moved into position around the station. The Valorian reptilians attacked from the east, their warships striking with precision and fury. The beings from Sigma Draconis attacked from the west, using their unique crystalline technology to create disruptions in the station's remaining electronic systems. Other Allied forces attacked from above and below, creating a complete encirclement that prevented any escape. Within an hour, the Galactic Council's most powerful military installations were offline or destroyed. Within 2 hours, Council forces in the system had surrendered. The Council members themselves attempted to flee in emergency escape pods, but they were intercepted by human forces. Nathan personally led a team aboard the station to secure the command center and ensure that the Council leadership could not regain control. When Nathan entered the Council chamber, he found the members gathered in a secure room that they had believed would protect them. They were terrified. Some of them had lived for centuries without experiencing violence or fear. For the first time in their long lives, they faced the possibility of death. Vexthar was among them, his scales darkened by fear. When he saw Nathan, his eyes widened with recognition. "You were not supposed to achieve this," Vexthar said, his voice trembling. "Humanity was supposed to remain contained. Your technology should have been insufficient." Nathan approached him slowly, his hand resting on the weapon at his side. "You made a mistake," Nathan said calmly. "You assumed that superior technology meant superior capability. You did not account for human adaptability. You did not account for the fact that when humans are threatened, we work together. We innovate. We find solutions that seem impossible. You underestimated us." News of the Council's fall spread throughout the galaxy at the speed of light, traveling faster than any starship could move. Species that had suffered under Council oppression for generations suddenly realized that they were free. Worlds that had been forced to supply resources to the Council began to wonder if they could reclaim control of their own destiny. The galactic order that had seemed so permanent and unchangeable suddenly seemed fragile and temporary. President Norton broadcast a message across all galactic channels, a message translated into thousands of languages and transmitted to millions of worlds. He explained what had happened and why it had happened. He offered a vision of a new galactic order based on genuine partnership and equality. He invited all species, oppressed and powerful alike, to join in building something better than what the Council had created. The response was overwhelming. Species throughout the galaxy, many of whom had felt helpless and defeated for so long, suddenly saw hope. They saw that change was possible. They saw that humanity, a species that the Council had tried to keep subservient, had actually led the rebellion that freed them all. Within days of the initial strike, revolts broke out on dozens of worlds. Species that had been held under Council control rose up and declared their independence. Some Council worlds surrendered peacefully, others fought. But without the Council's central command structure coordinating their defense, they were quickly overcome. Nathan stood on the bridge of the Resolve, watching reports of the cascading revolts flow across his screens. He had expected the operation might succeed in neutralizing the Council. He had not expected humanity to inspire an entire galactic revolution. But as he watched the news reports from across the galaxy, he understood the truth. The Galactic Council had ruled through fear and control. They had convinced species that they were more powerful, more advanced, more intelligent. When humanity proved that the Council could be defeated, they shattered that illusion. They showed every oppressed species in the galaxy that freedom was possible. They showed that one species, working together with others and using creativity and courage, could overcome even the most powerful enemy. This was what the Council had truly underestimated about humanity. Not our technology or our military capability. It was our hope and our ability to inspire hope in others, and that was a power that no amount of advanced technology could overcome. 6 months had passed since the fall of the Galactic Council. A great assembly had been called on the neutral world of Harmony Prime, a planet that had been carefully chosen because it belonged to no single species and had no previous ties to Council authority. Delegates from across the galaxy gathered in the Grand Conference Hall, a structure that had been built centuries ago as a symbol of peace and cooperation. Now it would serve as the birthplace of a new galactic government. Elena Rodriguez and Nathan Price stood together in the observation gallery, looking down at the assembly floor below. They had been asked to represent humanity in the new government, though neither of them had sought such positions. Elena preferred to continue her scientific work, and Nathan had hoped to return to a quiet life on Earth. But President Norton had asked them to serve, and they could not refuse. They were the symbols of humanity's transformation from a contained species to a liberated one. The new governing body was called the Galactic Assembly, and it was built on principles that were fundamentally different from those of the old Council. Every species had equal representation, regardless of their technological advancement or military capability. Decisions would be made through consensus and debate, not through the dominance of the most powerful species. Resources would be shared openly, and technologies would be distributed freely rather than hoarded by an elite group. The first order of business was addressing what would be done with the leaders of the old Council. Vexthar and several other Council members had been kept in secure facilities, while the Assembly decided their fate. Some species demanded execution as punishment for centuries of oppression. Others called for rehabilitation and redemption. The debate was passionate and sometimes angry, with representatives shouting at each other and walking out of sessions in protest. Elena watched the debates with a heavy heart. She understood the desire for revenge. The Council had caused immense suffering across the galaxy, but she also believed that if the new galactic order was to be truly different from the old one, it could not be built on violence and retribution. She stood up and requested permission to speak before the assembly. The request was granted, and she made her way down to the main floor. The chamber fell silent as she approached the podium. She looked out at thousands of alien beings, representatives from species that had never even known about each other before the Galactic Council had brought them into a galactic community. "I have been asked why I believe the leaders of the old Council should be allowed to live," Elena said. Her words translated into hundreds of languages simultaneously. "It is not because they do not deserve punishment for what they have done. It is because if we kill them, we become like them. We become oppressors. We become beings who solve problems through violence and elimination. The old Council was built on the assumption that might makes right, that the powerful have the authority to rule over the weak. If we accept that philosophy, then we have learned nothing from our struggle." She paused and looked directly at the section of the assembly where Vexthar sat in a secure chamber. "The real punishment," Elena continued, "is to force the leaders of the old Council to live in a world where their power is gone. To watch the species they tried to control rise up and flourish. to understand that their fear of humanity's potential was the very thing that created the threat they feared. That is a punishment far more profound than death. The assembly was silent for a long moment. Then one by one, representatives began to speak in support of Elena's words. The debate continued for many more days, but ultimately a decision was made. The leaders of the old council would be imprisoned on a neutral world, kept secure but allowed to live. They would be forced to witness the new galactic order developing without them, and to understand the consequences of their choices. As the months passed, the assembly made decisions that transformed galactic civilization. Technologies that had been restricted were now shared freely. Scientists from different species began collaborating on projects that none of them could have accomplished alone. The combination of human creativity, the computational power of the Valorians, the crystalline technology of the Sigma Draconis beings, and the unique abilities of dozens of other species created innovations that exceeded anything that the old council had ever developed. Elena led a new research initiative called the Collaborative Science Project. Teams of scientists from hundreds of worlds worked together to solve problems that affected all of galactic civilization. They developed cures for diseases that had plagued multiple species. They created new energy sources that did not damage the environments of worlds that produced them. They designed faster-than-light drives that were 50 times more efficient than the best technology the old council had possessed. Nathan found himself in a different role. He became the commander of the Galactic Defense Force, an organization designed to protect all worlds from external threats, rather than to enforce the will of a single government. He worked with military leaders from across the galaxy to create a defense strategy that was based on cooperation rather than dominance. For the first time in galactic history, security was shared rather than held as a weapon. Back on Earth, humanity changed as well. The restrictions that had limited their access to technology were gone, replaced by a flood of new knowledge. Universities expanded dramatically to teach the advanced sciences that were now available. Young humans began traveling to distant worlds to study and work alongside alien scientists and engineers. The planet that had once seemed so isolated and alone became a hub of galactic activity and innovation. President Norton addressed the people of Earth on the anniversary of the Council's fall. His message was broadcast across the planet and transmitted to human communities throughout the galaxy. 1 year ago, he said, humanity took a stand against oppression. We did not accept being contained. We did not accept being treated as lesser beings. But today I want to remind everyone that our greatest achievement was not the military victory. Our greatest achievement was proving that species from across the galaxy could work together toward a common goal. We learned that our differences are not obstacles but opportunities. We learned that cooperation and trust are more powerful than any weapon. On Harmony Prime, the Galactic Assembly had established a memorial to commemorate the revolution. It was built at the location where the old council headquarters had been transported after the station had been secured. The building was no longer a symbol of power and control. Instead, it was transformed into a museum and educational center where beings from all species could learn about the history of galactic oppression and the revolution that had freed them. Elena and Nathan stood together before the memorial on its opening day. Vexthar was there as well, having been allowed to attend under guard. When he saw Elena, he approached her slowly. The other security personnel moved as if to stop him, but Elena waved them away. "I have been thinking," Vexthar said, his voice quiet and thoughtful, "about what we did to humanity, about why we feared you so much. I believe now that we were not afraid of your potential for war or your ability to build weapons. We were afraid of something deeper. We were afraid that you might actually be right. That species could truly work together without domination. That cooperation might be stronger than control." Elena nodded. "That is what we discovered," she said. "Not just as humans, but together with every species in this galaxy. We discovered that when we stop fearing each other and start trusting each other, we can accomplish things that none of us could accomplish alone." Vexthar looked at her for a long moment, and then he bowed. It was a gesture that meant respect and acknowledgement across many cultures. "Then perhaps," he said, "something good has come from all of this suffering. Perhaps we will build something better." As years passed, humanity became not a contained species but an integral part of galactic civilization. The retribution that humanity had delivered to the Galactic Council had not been one of destruction or revenge. It had been the retribution of liberation. By freeing themselves, humanity had freed others. By refusing to accept containment, humanity had shown that freedom was possible for all. The story of humanity's rise was told and retold across thousands of worlds. Young beings of countless species grew up hearing about the humans who had refused to be oppressed, who had worked with their allies to build something better. And in that story, there was hope. Hope that no matter how powerful an oppressor might seem, freedom is always possible for those brave enough to fight for it. The galaxy had been transformed not by military might, but by the courage of one species to believe that a better future was possible, and the willingness of many species to work together to make that vision real. 10 years had passed since humanity's rise to prominence in the galactic community. The changes that had begun in those early months of liberation had grown and expanded in ways that no one could have predicted. Earth itself had been transformed into a symbol of hope and progress. The planet that had once felt isolated and alone in the universe now hosted visitors and scholars from thousands of different species. Universities had expanded their capacities to accommodate students from across the galaxy. The cities of Earth were now filled with alien beings, their different forms and ways of life, creating a tapestry of cultures that would have seemed impossible a decade ago. Nathan Price had stepped down from his position as commander of the Galactic Defense Force 3 years earlier. He had chosen to return to Earth and establish the Institute for Intergalactic Understanding, a facility dedicated to training young people from all species in the principles of cooperation and peaceful conflict resolution. The Institute had become the most prestigious educational center in the galaxy, with a waiting list that stretched for decades. Nathan spent his days working with young beings who would become the leaders and innovators of the next generation, teaching them not just about military strategy but about the deeper principles of working together across species lines. Elena Rodriguez had achieved something that she had only dreamed about when she was a young scientist. She had created the Collaborative Research Network, an organization that brought together the greatest minds from across the galaxy. They worked on problems that affected all of galactic civilization. One of their most significant achievements was the development of the Universal Energy Converter, a technology that allowed any world to generate the energy it needed without damaging its environment. This single technology had transformed the lives of millions of beings on hundreds of worlds. But Elena knew that the work was far from complete. She had established a secondary research facility on Europa, one of Jupiter's moons, where she was exploring a new frontier. The experiments being conducted here were designed to unlock the secrets of faster-than-light travel in ways that the old Galactic Council had never imagined. The goal was to create drives that would allow beings to travel not just faster than light, but to move through space in entirely new ways, potentially making travel between galaxies possible within a human lifetime. On this particular day, Elena stood in the observation chamber of the research facility, watching a test of the new drive system. Her team had been working on this technology for 3 years, and they were finally ready for the first real-world test. A small probe had been loaded with the experimental drive and was positioned in a specially prepared launch chamber. "All systems show green," reported Kevin Park, the brilliant physicist who had made the original breakthrough in understanding the Council's technology years ago. Kevin had grown old in those 10 years, his hair now completely gray and his face lined with the marks of a life spent in intense intellectual pursuits. But his mind remained sharp and his passion for discovery had not diminished one bit. "Initialize the drive," Elena commanded. The probe began to glow with an eerie blue light. The instruments around it went wild with readings, showing energy levels that surpassed anything humanity had previously achieved. And then, in an instant that seemed to last both a second and an eternity, the probe disappeared. For several seconds there was silence in the observation chamber. Then alarms began to sound as the monitoring equipment tried to process what had happened. But Elena was not alarmed. She was smiling. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it." The probe had not simply traveled to another location in space. It had punched through the fabric of normal space-time itself and emerged in a region of space that should have been inaccessible through normal travel. The probe was reporting back data from a region of the galaxy that was normally unreachable, a distance that would have taken years to travel through conventional faster-than-light drives. Word of the breakthrough spread quickly through the scientific community. Within days, Researchers from across the galaxy were requesting access to Elena's research and asking to collaborate on the next phase of development. The technology promised to revolutionize space travel once again and to open up new regions of the universe for exploration and habitation. But not everyone was celebrating. In the detention facility on the world where the former council members were imprisoned, Vexthar had received news of the breakthrough through the reports that were shared with the detainees. He sat alone in his cell, contemplating what it meant. Humanity had not simply caught up to the level of technology that the Galactic Council had possessed. They had surpassed it. They had achieved something new, something that even the Council's greatest scientists had never managed to accomplish. A guard came to his cell one day and informed him that he had received a visitor. Vexthar was surprised. Very few people came to see him anymore. But when he entered the visitor's chamber, he found Elena Rodriguez waiting for him. "I wanted to tell you personally," Elena said, "that we have made another breakthrough. The new drive technology is working beyond our expectations. It is going to open up possibilities that we could barely imagine." Vexthar studied her carefully. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked. "Because I wanted you to understand something," Elena replied. "The fear that drove you and the other council members to contain humanity was based on a fundamental misunderstanding. You thought that if we became more powerful, we would become like you. You thought we would use our power to dominate others. But we did not. We used our power to liberate others. We used our knowledge to build partnerships instead of hierarchies. And I wanted you to see the result of that choice." Vexithar was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was filled with a kind of sad understanding. "I see it now," he said, "and it shames me to think of what we could have accomplished if we had trusted you instead of fearing you. Imagine what the galaxy might have achieved if the Council and humanity had worked together from the beginning." "That is in the past," Elena said, "but the future is still unwritten, and there are still many chapters to be written." Back on Earth, President Norton had chosen not to seek another term in office. A new generation of leaders had taken over. Young people who had grown up in the era of galactic cooperation and who had no memory of the old restrictions and fears. The Earth that they governed was a very different place from the world that had first contacted the Galactic Council all those years ago. A young woman named Lisa Morrison, a descendant of the first human researchers who had studied alien technology, stood before the United Nations Assembly. She was announcing a new initiative that humanity was proposing to the Galactic Assembly. It was called the Exploration Initiative, and its goal was to send expeditions into regions of space that had never been explored before, not just by humans but by any species. "We have the technology now to reach distant galaxies," Lisa said. "We have the knowledge to understand worlds that are fundamentally different from anything we have encountered before. But more than that, we have the experience of learning how to work together across species lines. We have learned that diversity is not a weakness but a strength. I propose that we send these expeditions as joint ventures, with scientists and explorers from hundreds of different species working together. We will not conquer new worlds. We will not extract resources and dominate. We will explore with respect and wonder, seeking to understand and to share what we discover." The proposal was met with overwhelming enthusiasm. Within months, the first expeditions were being prepared. Ships were being built that incorporated technology from dozens of different species. Crews were being assembled that would represent some of the greatest diversity that any single mission had ever seen. Nathan Price watched the preparations with a sense of profound satisfaction. He had spent his early life fighting a war that he had not wanted to fight, against an enemy that had forced his hand. But now, in these later years, he was able to see the benefits of the struggle. The universe was opening up. Beings from across the galaxy were working together, not because they were forced to, but because they wanted to. They understood that cooperation led to greater achievements than domination ever could. On the night before the first expedition was scheduled to depart, Elena and Nathan stood together on a hilltop overlooking Earth's primary launch facility. Below them, enormous ships were being prepared for their journey into the unknown. Each ship represented months of work and the cooperation of thousands of beings from hundreds of different species. "Do you ever regret it?" Nathan asked. "Going to the president with those documents? Starting all of this?" Elena was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes," she admitted, "because what we started led to war and conflict. But then I see things like this and I remember why we did it. We did it so that species like humanity would not be contained, so that we would be free to explore and discover and innovate, and most importantly, so that we could do it together with others instead of alone. Nathan nodded. In the distance, the sun was setting over Earth, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. It was a view that had remained unchanged for millions of years, and it would remain unchanged for millions of years.